So last Saturday, I did something that I have not done in a very long time, and I went to the opera. It was Rufus Wainwright had composed an opera called Hadrian. And the first 20 minutes of the second set or scene was this this image of two lovers embracing one another. And at first I thought, well, this is going on a really long time. This moment of eros or of passionate embrace. But then all of a sudden, this scene kind of broke wide open into this image or this experience, this spiritual experience of being embraced and the human, universal human need that we have. To be held and to be embraced and to be loved, that goes far beyond the particular love of eros, but it includes it. What I was reminded of is just like how we as human beings need to be held, and that's both physically and actually and metaphorically. It's a universal need. And this universal need is expressed through scriptures. We see it laced throughout all the stories of God that we read. The Israelites are exiting out of slavery into freedom in the desert, and they are held together in God's promise through a pillar of cloud and fire, through manna. They're held together as a community and as people of God. We see in Jesus' ministry, so many of those stories are about people needing to embrace Jesus or Jesus needing to embrace them. Like people coming and falling at Jesus' feet to anoint him with oil, like the Samaritan woman. Or Jesus needing to embrace those in the world that were outcasts or considered or deemed unlovable. And in this story today, we see, in the story of Lazarus, Martha held in her grief. We see Lazarus held in his death, in the greater story of God's life and death and life beyond death. And actually, in the stories found in the other Gospels, we see actually Jesus held in his grief. It says Jesus wept. And in that community of faith that was grieving the loss of Lazarus, there was an element of embrace. And I think that this is important because it's a part of our human story from the very beginning to the very end of our lives. It's been said that when we are conceived and we're in our mother's wombs, that we're held in a warm and safe and comfortable place for us. And it's said that as we grow in our mother's womb, it becomes familiar to us. We are warm and safe. We hear her heartbeat and her breath. We recognize her voice. This world becomes a familiar world to us. And in birth, we're taken out of that world into a world of uncertainty and possibilities. And in that moment, we're handed into the arms of our mothers who keep us alive, who offer us care and compassion that we need as infants, that we know developmentally that we need. And over time, we grow out of our mother's arms, and this world becomes a familiar place to us, where we find comfort and embrace in those around us, in familiar places and faces. And as Deb said last week, she's like, one of the most profound moments that she's experienced God's glory was at a funeral when someone came up and grabbed her hand, right? So we find comfort and grace and embrace in this life. And then in death, we're taken from this familiar place and enter into a world of uncertainty. And in that moment, we are handed over into the arms of our God, into this embrace. I think this message of God's embrace that is laced throughout our entire lives and beyond it is a really important one. I think it's important to remember the embrace of God, that we're called to both receive and to extend. And I think it's essential actually in this time and age when we see this polarization, happening politically and socially, where it's come out this week that the synagogue that was targeted with that mass shooting last week or 2 weeks ago, one of the reasons why they were targeted was because they were known for helping and assisting new Americans settle. And so this idea that a faith community is targeted for doing the embrace and being the embrace of God, we are in challenging times where that message has to be stronger and purer. And so on All Souls Day, it's one of my favorite services, and people have asked me why, because it's so sad. Actually, a number of people have this week. And for me, what it is, it's really about the embrace of God in our sadness as human beings. Acknowledging those people in our lives that have meant so much to us, that we love dearly, but that we no longer see. Recognizing that they are in the embrace of God, and that in our grief, we are held in the embrace of God and community and one another. And so it's about the embrace. It's about the love that we all as human beings need, and that God promises to us in one another, and into our experiences of God, God's self. Amen.